The sun hung low over Tulsa, Oklahoma, painting the sky crimson and gold as Amelia Foster wiped flour from her hands and stepped onto the porch, only to freeze at the sight of a lone rider dismounting at her gate in the fading light of September 1882. She knew that silhouette even after 3 years. The broad shoulders, the easy way he moved, the worn leather hat he pulled from his head as he turned toward her. Thomas Garrett, the man who had left without explanation one autumn morning, breaking her heart into so many pieces she thought she would never recover. Her breath caught in her throat as their eyes met across the dusty yard. Amelia. His voice carried on the evening breeze, rough and warm like she remembered. She gripped the porch railing, willing her legs to stay steady. "You have some nerve showing up here, Thomas Garrett." He took a step closer, and she could see the weariness in his face, the lines that hadn't been there before. His blue eyes held something she couldn't quite name. I know I do, but I came back because home is where you are." The words hit her like a physical blow. For 3 years she had imagined what she might say if she ever saw him again. She had rehearsed angry speeches, practiced cold indifference. But now, with him standing there looking at her like she was water in a desert, all those carefully constructed walls threatened to crumble. "You left," she said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. "You left without a word, without a letter, nothing. I can explain. Can you?" She descended the porch steps, anger giving her courage. "Can you really explain why you asked my father for permission to court me? Why you spent every Sunday sitting in our parlor? Why you kissed me under the cottonwood tree and told me you were going to marry me and then just disappeared?" Thomas flinched at each accusation. "May I come in? Please. What I have to say isn't meant for the whole town to hear." Amelia glanced around, noticing curtains twitching in neighboring windows. Mrs. Henderson across the way was openly staring. She sighed, knowing that either way, this would be the talk of Tulsa by morning. "Fine. But I'm not promising anything except 5 minutes of my time." He tied his horse to the gate post and followed her into the small house. The interior was modest but clean, everything in its place. She had worked hard to make a home for herself after her father died last year, teaching at the schoolhouse and taking in sewing to make ends meet. She wasn't the naive girl of 20 he had left behind. She was a woman now, independent and capable. "Sit," she said, not bothering with hospitality. She remained standing, arms crossed. Thomas sat at her kitchen table, turning his hat in his hands. In the lamplight, she could see more clearly the changes in him. He was leaner, harder somehow. There was a scar along his jawline that was new. But his eyes, those blue eyes that had haunted her dreams, were the same. "I had to leave," he began. 3 years ago, I got word that my brother was in trouble, serious trouble. He was working a ranch up in Montana Territory and had gotten mixed up with some cattle rustlers. Not by choice. They threatened to kill his wife and baby daughter if he didn't help them. Amelia's stance softened slightly despite herself. She had met his brother once, a gentle man with a kind smile. "The law wouldn't help because there wasn't enough evidence," Thomas continued, "so I went up there myself. I thought it would take a few weeks, maybe a month. I thought I could fix it and come right back to you. You still could have told me," she interrupted. "You could have sent a letter." "I couldn't." He looked up at her, pain evident in his expression. These men, they were dangerous. They had connections everywhere. I was afraid if anyone knew where I was or why I was there, they would use it against me, use you against me, so I just left, thinking I was protecting you. That wasn't your choice to make. I know that now." He stood, taking a step toward her. "Amelia." Those weeks turned into months. The situation was worse than I thought. My brother was in deep. It took me a year just to gather enough evidence to bring the law in properly, and even then, there were trials, testimonies. Some of those men escaped and had to be tracked down. I couldn't come back until I knew for certain you wouldn't be in danger. And you think that makes it all right?" She felt tears pricking her eyes and hated herself for it. "Do you know what it was like? Everyone pitying me, asking what I had done to drive you away. My father died last winter thinking I would end up a spinster because I was ruined for any other man." Thomas's face crumbled. "I'm sorry. God, Amelia, I'm so sorry about your father. I heard about it 2 months ago when I was passing through Kansas. It killed me that I wasn't here for you. Where have you been for the past year if everything was resolved?" He ran a hand through his dark hair. "Working. Saving money. I had nothing when I left, and I knew I couldn't come back to you empty-handed. I've been working ranches, doing odd jobs, putting away every penny. I bought some land about 20 miles from here. Good land with water rights. I've been building a house." Amelia's heart stuttered. "You've been back in Oklahoma and didn't come to see me." "I wanted to have something to offer you," he said desperately. "I wanted to be able to stand in front of you and show you I could provide for you, that I was worth waiting for. I never cared about land or money, Thomas. I cared about you. I know. I realize now how foolish I was. I should have come straight to you the moment I could. Instead, I've been torturing myself for months, building a house and wondering if you would even want to see it, if you would even want to see me." He took another step closer. "But I couldn't stay away any longer. Every board I hammered, every fence post I set, I thought about you, about us, about the life we talked about having." She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to hold onto her hurt and send him away. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine remorse and longing in his face, she felt her resolve weakening. "I grieved you like you were dead," she whispered. "I had to put away my feelings and lock them up just to survive each day. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I'm asking for it anyway. I'm asking for a chance to make this right, to prove to you that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." The words hung in the air between them. The house was quiet except for the ticking of her father's old clock on the mantel. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "Then let me earn it back." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His touch sent familiar warmth through her, a feeling she had tried to forget. "Give me a chance, Amelia. Let me court you properly this time. Let me show you that I'm here to stay." She looked down at their joined hands, his calloused and work-worn, hers small and pale in his grip. 3 years ago she had imagined their wedding, pictured the children they would have, dreamed of growing old together. Those dreams had died hard. "Why now?" she asked, needing to understand. "Why today?" "Because I finally finished the house. And sitting there last night, looking at the empty rooms, I realized I was being a coward. I was hiding behind excuses, telling myself I needed to have everything perfect before I faced you. But the truth is, nothing will ever be perfect without you in it. That house isn't a home. This whole territory isn't home. You're my home, Amelia. You always have been." A tear escaped down her cheek before she could stop it. "You hurt me so badly, I know." He reached up with his free hand and gently wiped the tear away. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you let me." She pulled her hand away, needing space to think. She walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street. Her reflection stared back at her, and she barely recognized the uncertain woman she saw. She had built a life without him. She had learned to be alone, to depend only on herself. Letting him back in meant risking everything all over again. But she also couldn't deny that seeing him had awakened something in her she thought was long dead. The moment she had seen him at the gate, her heart had leaped before her head could catch up. Somewhere deep inside, in a place she had tried to bury, she still loved him. "I need time," she said finally, still facing the window. I can't just pick up where we left off like nothing happened. I understand. She heard him stand, heard his boots against the wooden floor. Take all the time you need. I'll be at the boarding house if you want to talk. Or I can come by if you'll allow it, whatever you're comfortable with. She turned to face him. In the lamplight, he looked vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. Tomorrow evening, she said, you can come for supper, but that doesn't mean anything is decided. It just means I'm willing to listen. His face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him look like the young man she had fallen in love with. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. After he left, Amelia sank into her father's chair and let the tears come. They were complicated tears, a mixture of pain and hope, anger and longing. She cried for the girl she had been, for the 3 years they had lost, for her father who would never see her married. But she also cried from relief, from the overwhelming feeling of having Thomas back in her life, even if she didn't know yet what that would mean. The next day crawled by. Her students at the schoolhouse were particularly rowdy, sensing her distraction. Little Emma Patterson asked if she was feeling well, and Amelia realized she must look as unsettled as she felt. She taught arithmetic and reading by rote, her mind constantly drifting to what she would say that evening. By the time she dismissed the children and walked home, she had worked herself into a state. She changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue calico that she knew brought out her eyes. Then she berated herself for caring what she looked like. This wasn't a romantic dinner. It was a discussion, nothing more. She made chicken and dumplings, her father's favorite, and set the table carefully. When the knock came at precisely 6 o'clock, her hands were shaking. Thomas stood on her porch holding a bouquet of wildflowers, looking nervous. He had cleaned up, his hair still damp, wearing a clean shirt and vest. These were growing along the road, he said, offering the flowers. I remembered you liked them. She did. She had mentioned it once years ago that she preferred wildflowers to cultivated roses. The fact that he remembered made her throat tight. Come in. Dinner was awkward at first. They made stilted conversation about the weather, about the town's growth. But gradually, as they ate, some of the old ease returned. He complimented her cooking. She asked about his land. They were circling around the important topics, both afraid to dive too deep. Tell me about Montana, she said finally, pushing her plate away. Tell me everything. So he did. He talked about tracking down the rustlers, about the harsh winter he spent in the mountains, about the day he finally got enough evidence to bring them to justice. He talked about his brother's relief, about meeting his niece for the first time. He talked about the guilt that ate at him every day he was away from her. I wrote you letters, he admitted. Dozens of them, but I never sent them. I didn't know what to say that would make it better. I didn't know how to explain without sounding like I was making excuses. I would have understood, she said softly. If you had just told me the truth, I would have waited. Would you have? Really? He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. If I had told you I was leaving to help my brother with dangerous men, that I didn't know when I would be back, that I couldn't write or stay in contact, would you really have been able to wait without answers? Without knowing if I was alive or dead? The question hung between them. Amelia wanted to say yes, wanted to believe she would have been that strong, but honestly she didn't know. The not knowing would have been torture. I suppose we'll never find out. I made the wrong choice, he said. I see that now. I should have trusted you with the truth. I should have trusted us. Instead, I tried to protect you and ended up hurting you worse. Yes, you did. She wasn't going to make this easy for him, even as her heart softened. Can you forgive me? She was quiet for a long moment, really considering the question. Could she forgive him? Or more importantly, could she trust him again? I think I can forgive you, she said slowly, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't erase what happened. I know. If we were to try again, things would have to be different. You would have to promise me complete honesty. No more making decisions for me, no matter how noble you think your intentions are. I promise. His voice was fervent. Amelia, I swear to you, I will never keep anything from you again. You deserve to know everything, to be part of every decision. She nodded slowly. Then I suppose we can start fresh. Not pick up where we left off, but begin again. Get to know each other as the people we are now. The smile that spread across his face was worth every ounce of hurt. I would like that very much. Over the next few weeks, Thomas courted her properly. He came to dinner several times a week, always bringing small gifts, more wildflowers, a book he thought she would enjoy, fresh vegetables from a farmer's market. He helped her with repairs around her house, fixing a loose step on the porch and replacing a cracked window pane. He attended church with her on Sundays, enduring the curious stares and whispered gossip with quiet dignity. Slowly, Amelia felt her walls coming down. She remembered why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. He was kind and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He listened when she talked about her students, asked genuine questions about her work. He told her his dreams for his ranch, his plans to breed quality horses. He made her feel valued, cherished. But she was also cautious. Part of her was still waiting for him to disappear again, to prove that her trust was misplaced. She caught herself sometimes, pulling back when they grew too close, reminding herself to guard her heart. Thomas noticed, of course. One evening in late October, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, he said, "You're afraid." It wasn't a question. She sighed, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I'm terrified. Of me. Of this. Of letting myself feel everything I used to feel and having it ripped away again." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "I can't promise that life won't throw us challenges. I can't promise that everything will always be perfect, but I can promise that I won't leave you again. No matter what comes, we'll face it together." "How can you be sure?" "Because living without you these past 3 years taught me that nothing is worth losing you. Not pride, not protection, not anything. You're the most important thing in my life, Amelia. More important than my own fears or doubts." She turned to look at him, seeing the earnestness in his face. "I want to believe you. Then do. Take a leap of faith with me." He shifted, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he might be proposing, but instead he said, "Come see the house. Let me show you what I've built, what I've been building for us. Us. I built it with you in mind. Every choice, every detail, I need you to see it. And then, if you still have doubts, if you still can't trust me, I'll accept that. But please just come see it." She agreed, and the following Sunday after church, she rode out with him to his land. The journey took about an hour, through rolling hills covered in autumn grass. They followed a creek lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves golden in the sunlight. It was beautiful country, peaceful and unspoiled. The house came into view as they crested a hill, and Amelia's breath caught. It was modest but well built, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. There was a barn nearby, newly constructed, and a fenced pasture where several horses grazed. "Thomas," she breathed. "It's lovely." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. "Come inside." He led her through rooms that smelled of fresh wood and possibility. The main floor had a generous kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dining area, and a parlor with large windows. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, each flooded with light. "I built the kitchen bigger than standard," he explained, watching her run her hand along the counter. "I remembered you said you liked to bake and you needed space for it. And the parlor, I positioned those windows so you could have good light for sewing and reading." She walked through the rooms in wonder, noticing all the small details. Built-in shelves in the parlor, perfect for books. A deep pantry off the kitchen. A window seat in what was clearly meant to be the master bedroom, overlooking the creek and hills beyond. "You built this for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For us," he corrected, coming to stand behind her at the window. "I built it dreaming of our life together, our children playing in that yard, growing old together on that porch." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I love it. Does that mean what I hope it means? It means I'm tired of being afraid. It means I want to trust you, trust us." She reached up, touching his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. "It means I never stopped loving you, no matter how hard I tried." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, wrapping her arms around him. She felt his heart pounding against hers, felt his breath in her hair. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the empty house that was waiting to become a home. "Marry me," he said into her hair. "I know I should do this properly, with a ring and on one knee, but I can't wait another moment. Marry me, Amelia. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." She pulled back to look at him, seeing everything she had ever wanted reflected in his eyes. Yes. His kiss was everything she remembered and more. It was gentle and passionate, full of promise and hope. It was coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'll get you a ring," he said. "A proper one. I don't need a ring right now, I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Tulsa. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the townspeople who had watched their story unfold. Mrs. Henderson cried openly, declaring it the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. Amelia's students threw rice as they left the church, giggling with excitement. The night of their wedding, Thomas carried her over the threshold of their new home. He had furnished it while she had been packing up her father's house, adding final touches to make it comfortable. There was a quilt on their bed, handmade by his mother and sent down from Montana. Fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table, curtains in the windows. "Welcome home, Mrs. Garrett," he said, setting her down gently in the parlor. Mrs. Garrett. She was Amelia Garrett now, no longer Amelia Foster, a new name for a new beginning. "I like the sound of that." That first night in their home was everything she had dreamed of during their first courtship. Thomas was tender and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms in their marriage bed, listening to his heartbeat slow, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. "No regrets," he murmured into the darkness. "Not a single one. I promise you won't ever have cause for any. I'll love you until my last breath, Amelia. And I'll love you until mine." The first months of their marriage were blissful. They fell into an easy rhythm, working the ranch together. Amelia continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week while Thomas managed the horses. He was breeding quarter horses, animals known for their speed and agility, and his stock was gaining a reputation in the territory. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, talking about their days. Thomas would tell her about the horses, about his plans to expand the herd. Amelia would share stories about her students, about the town gossip she heard. They were building a life together, brick by brick, moment by moment. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Amelia loved those months, cozy in their home with a fire crackling in the hearth. Thomas taught her to play chess, and they spent long evenings bent over the board, competing fiercely. She taught him to bake, laughing as he got flour everywhere and burned his first attempt at biscuits. It was during a snowstorm in January that Amelia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but now she was certain. She chose a quiet evening to tell Thomas, after dinner when they were sitting by the fire. "I have something to tell you," she said, setting aside her sewing. He looked up from the saddle he was repairing. "What is it?" "We're going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "Truly, truly. Probably sometime in August." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully like she was made of glass. "A baby. We're going to have a baby." His voice was choked with emotion. "You've made me the happiest man alive, Amelia," she laughed, crying a little herself. "We made this baby together. You had something to do with it." The months that followed were filled with preparation. Thomas insisted she stop riding into town, afraid for her safety on the rough roads. She agreed to stop teaching in her 6th month, letting the town hire a temporary replacement. He built a cradle from oak, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Amelia sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were. Thomas became almost comically protective. He helped her with everything, never letting her lift anything heavy. He made sure she ate well, bringing her her favorite foods from town. At night, he would talk to her growing belly, telling their baby stories, making plans for the future. "I hope they have your eyes," he said one night, his hand spread over her stomach. "I hope they have your strength," she replied. "I hope they know how much they are already loved." Their daughter was born on a hot August night, delivered by the midwife from town. It was a long labor, and Thomas paced outside the bedroom, terrified. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door, not caring what the midwife said about propriety. "A girl," Amelia said tiredly, holding the tiny bundle. "We have a daughter." Thomas approached slowly, awe on his face. The baby was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. When Amelia placed her in his arms, he looked like he might cry. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your papa." They named her Rose after Amelia's mother. Little Rose Garrett became the center of their world. She was a good baby, happy and healthy. Thomas was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing to her in his rough voice until she fell asleep. Watching him with their daughter, Amelia felt her heart might burst with love. This was the life they had dreamed of, the family they had wanted. All the pain of their separation felt worth it now, a chapter that had made their reunion sweeter. As Rose grew from a baby into a toddler, their life continued its peaceful rhythm. The ranch prospered. Thomas's horses were in high demand, bringing in good money. Amelia took in some students again, teaching a few children whose families lived nearby. She liked the balance of being a mother and still using her teaching skills. When Rose was 2, Amelia became pregnant again. This time it was twins, a surprise that left them both shocked and delighted. The pregnancy was harder, and Thomas hired a woman from town to help with Rose and the household while Amelia rested. The twins, both boys, were born in April. They named them James and John, and they were mirror images of each other, with Thomas's blue eyes and Amelia's fair coloring. The house suddenly felt full and chaotic in the best way possible. "We have our hands full now," Thomas said one evening, surveying the scene. Rose was playing with her dolls, and both twins were crying for feeding. "We certainly do," Amelia agreed, laughing as she nursed one baby while Thomas took the other. "Any regrets?" It was a question he asked sometimes, usually half joking but with a hint of real curiosity. She knew what he was really asking. Was she happy? Did she regret taking him back? "Not a single one," she said, the same answer she always gave. "This is exactly where I want to be." The years passed in a blur of beautiful moments. Rose started school, proudly carrying her lunch pail. The twins learned to walk and immediately got into everything. Thomas expanded the ranch, building additional stables and hiring a few ranch hands to help. Amelia started teaching again part-time when the children were older, loving the return to her passion. There were challenges, of course. One winter, a disease swept through the horses, and they lost several valuable animals. Money was tight for a few months while they rebuilt the herd. One of the twins, James, had a bad fall from a fence and broke his arm. Rose came down with scarlet fever when she was 7, and they spent terrifying days nursing her back to health. But through every challenge, Thomas kept his promise. He was there, steady and strong. He never hid his worries from Amelia, never tried to protect her by keeping secrets. They faced everything together, as partners. On their 10th anniversary, Thomas surprised her with a trip to Oklahoma City. It was the first time they had been away from the children, leaving them with Thomas's brother and his wife who had moved to Oklahoma the previous year. They stayed in a hotel, something Amelia had never done before, and ate at a fancy restaurant. 10 years, Thomas said, raising his glass of wine. The best 10 years of my life. Technically, it's been 13 years since we met, Amelia pointed out. True. But I don't like to think about those 3 years we lost. I don't think they were lost anymore. She reached across the table, taking his hand. I think we needed that time. As awful as it was, it made us appreciate what we have now. It taught us not to take each other for granted. You're wiser than I am. I'm practical. You're romantic, he grinned. Is that a complaint? Not at all. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Thomas Garrett. I love the life we've built. I love our children. I love growing older with you. We're not that old. You're only 33. And you're 36. We're not young anymore either. We're in our prime, he insisted, making her laugh. That night in the hotel, they made love like they were young again, with passion and tenderness. Afterward, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Amelia felt grateful for every moment that had led them here. When they returned home, they found the house in chaos. Rose had apparently been in charge and had let the twins run wild. There was mud tracked through the kitchen, and John had somehow gotten into the flour bin. Thomas's brother looked exhausted but amused. Welcome home, he said. Your children are little terrors. They're creative, Amelia corrected, surveying the damage with resignation. That's one word for it. After they cleaned up and got the children to bed, Thomas and Amelia collapsed on the porch, exhausted. Should we regret leaving? Thomas asked. Absolutely not. That was wonderful. We should do it again sometime. In another 10 years, maybe. They laughed, comfortable in their exhaustion, in their life. As the children grew older, the ranch continued to thrive. Rose developed a love for horses like her father, spending every free moment in the stables. The twins were more interested in mechanics, taking apart anything they could get their hands on and usually managing to put it back together. Thomas encouraged all their interests, patient with their questions, proud of their accomplishments. Amelia taught all 3 children herself once they were old enough, setting up a little schoolroom in one of the spare bedrooms. She loved teaching her own children, watching them learn and grow. She also continued teaching other children in the area, expanding her little school until she had nearly 15 students. One afternoon when Rose was 12, she came running into the house with exciting news. Mama, Papa, there's a man at the gate asking for Papa. Thomas went out to investigate and returned with a stranger, a well-dressed man from Texas who had heard about Thomas's horses. He wanted to buy breeding stock, offering a generous price. It was the beginning of a relationship that would expand Thomas's business significantly. Over the next few years, Thomas's reputation as a horse breeder grew. People came from as far as Kansas and Texas to buy his animals. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. They were able to hire more help, to improve their home, to save money for the children's futures. But success didn't change them fundamentally. They remained grounded, remembering their humble beginnings. Thomas still worked alongside his ranch hands, never considering himself above manual labor. Amelia still took in students who couldn't pay, teaching them for free. They donated to their church, helped neighbors in need. When Rose turned 16, she fell in love with one of the ranch hands, a young man named Peter who had been working for them for 2 years. Thomas was protective, but Amelia reminded him that Rose was nearly the same age she had been when Thomas had started courting her. "That's different," Thomas protested. "How is it different? Because she's my daughter." Amelia laughed at his indignation but understood it. Watching your child fall in love was bittersweet. She talked to Rose, making sure the young woman understood her own worth, that she never settled for less than she deserved. And she observed Peter carefully, judging his character. In the end, she approved. Peter was hardworking and honest, clearly devoted to Rose. He asked Thomas's permission to court her properly, facing the older man with brave respect. Thomas, remembering his own youth, gave his blessing. The twins, now 14, teased their sister mercilessly about her beau. But they also were protective in their own way, making sure Peter knew they would answer to them if he hurt Rose. Life continued its forward march. Seasons changed, children grew, the ranch evolved. Through it all, Amelia and Thomas remained the steady center. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, still talked about their days. Their love had deepened over the years, becoming something richer and more complex than the young passion they had started with. They knew each other completely now. They knew each other's moods and quirks, knew how to comfort and how to challenge. They had weathered storms together, had celebrated victories together. They had built a life from nothing, had created a family, had made a home. When Rose married Peter in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Tulsa, Amelia cried tears of joy and nostalgia. Her little girl was a woman now, starting her own life. Peter had saved money and bought a small piece of land adjacent to Thomas's ranch. They would be neighbors, which comforted Amelia. "Where did the time go?" she asked Thomas that night, watching the stars from their porch. "I don't know, but I'm grateful for every moment, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. They taught us what we were made of." The twins graduated from the school Amelia ran and decided to go into business together, opening a repair shop in Tulsa. They were talented with their hands, able to fix anything mechanical. Thomas helped them get started, providing the initial investment. With all the children grown and gone, the house felt suddenly empty. Amelia found herself at loose ends, unsure what to do with all her free time. She was only 43, too young to be done with life but feeling adrift. "We could travel," Thomas suggested. "See some of the country we've never visited." "We could," she agreed. "But I think I'd like to expand the school, maybe build a proper schoolhouse, hire another teacher, serve more families." Thomas loved the idea. Together, they planned and built a schoolhouse on their property, large enough for 30 students. Amelia hired a young teacher fresh from a normal school back east, a bright woman who shared her passion for education. Together, they created something special, a place where children could learn regardless of their family's ability to pay. The schoolhouse became Amelia's legacy. Children from all over the county attended, getting educations that opened doors for them. Some went on to universities, becoming doctors and lawyers. Others became teachers themselves, spreading knowledge further. Amelia watched with pride as her students succeeded. Thomas focused on mentoring young ranchers, sharing his knowledge freely. He had learned so much over the years, and he wanted to pass it on. Young men would come to learn about horse breeding, about ranch management, and Thomas would patiently teach them everything he knew. Rose gave them their first grandchild when she was 20, a beautiful granddaughter they named Amelia Rose. Holding her tiny namesake, Amelia felt the circle of life continue. She was a grandmother now, a new role to learn and love. The twins married within months of each other, both to women they met in Tulsa. More grandchildren followed, filling the house with noise and laughter during holidays and Sundays. Thomas and Amelia's home became the gathering place for their expanding family. One evening, sitting on their porch as they had done countless times over the years, Thomas said, "Do you remember the day I came back, when I stood at your gate? Of course I remember. I thought my heart would stop. I was so afraid you would send me away, that I had lost my chance. I almost did send you away. I was so hurt, so angry. I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you gave me another chance." Amelia reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I'm glad, too. You kept your promise, Thomas. You made me happy. You made a home with me." "You're still my home," he said. "You'll always be my home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land. In the distance, they could hear horses whinnying, children playing at Rose's house next door. The life they had built surrounded them, tangible proof of their love and commitment. Years continued to pass. Thomas's hair went gray, then white. Amelia's face showed lines of age and laughter. Their bodies slowed, but their love remained constant. They celebrated 40 years of marriage surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. 40 years, Amelia marveled, plus the 3 before. 43 years since I first saw you and knew you were meant to be mine. That's a lot of years. "Not enough," Thomas said. "I want 1,000 more." But they both knew time was precious. Thomas had developed a persistent cough that winter, and though he tried to hide it, Amelia knew he wasn't well. She convinced him to see a doctor in Oklahoma City, but the news wasn't good. His heart was weakening, the doctor said. He needed to take it easy, reduce his stress. Thomas tried, but slowing down wasn't in his nature. He still went to the stables every day, still checked on the horses. He still taught young ranchers, still helped his sons with their business. He was determined to live fully for whatever time he had left. They talked about it one night, lying in bed. "I'm not afraid of dying," Thomas said. "I've had a good life, a full life. My only regret is leaving you." "Then don't leave," Amelia said fiercely, even though she knew it wasn't that simple. "You know I'll stay as long as I can. But when my time comes, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Live. Keep living, keep teaching, keep loving our family. Don't lock yourself away in grief. You're still young enough to have many good years ahead." "I don't want to think about it. I know. But I need to know you'll be all right," she promised, even though the thought of life without him was unbearable. They had been partners for so long, she didn't know how to be just herself anymore. Thomas lived for another 5 years, defying the doctor's predictions. They were good years, filled with love and family. He got to see all his grandchildren grow, got to meet several great-grandchildren. He and Amelia celebrated their 45th anniversary with a huge party that seemed to include half the county. On a warm summer evening, sitting on their porch as they always had, Thomas took Amelia's hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For everything. For forgiving me. For building this life with me. For loving me even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it," she said, her throat tight. "I love you, Amelia Garrett. I loved you the first moment I saw you, and I'll love you beyond my last breath. And I love you, always." He died that night, peacefully in his sleep, holding her hand. Amelia woke to find him gone, and the grief that crashed over her was overwhelming. But even in her sorrow, she felt grateful. They had been given so much time together, had built so much love. Not everyone was that fortunate. The funeral was huge, attended by what seemed like everyone in Oklahoma. Thomas had touched many lives through his kindness and generosity. People shared stories of how he had helped them, taught them, supported them. Amelia listened, proud of the man her husband had been. Keeping her promise to Thomas, she didn't let grief consume her. She continued teaching, continued being involved with her family. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, making sure she wasn't alone. Rose moved back to the main house for a while, keeping her mother company. One evening, about a year after Thomas died, Amelia sat alone on the porch. Well, not quite alone. Their grandson Samuel, Rose's youngest boy who was 12, sat with her. "Grandma, did you always know you would marry Grandpa?" he asked. Amelia smiled at the question. "I knew I loved him very early on, but there was a time when I thought we wouldn't be together." "Really? Why?" So she told him the story. About Thomas leaving, about the 3 years apart, about the day he came back and stood at the gate. She told him about forgiveness and second chances, about building a life together. "He said I was his home," she finished. "And he was mine. That's what love is, Samuel. It's finding the person who feels like home and choosing them every single day." "I hope I find that someday," the boy said wistfully. "You will. And when you do, hold on to it, fight for it. It's the most precious thing in the world." Amelia lived for another 15 years after Thomas died, long enough to see her great-grandchildren grow, long enough to see the new century arrive. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, teaching until she was 80 years old. The school she and Thomas had built continued to thrive, eventually expanding into a full academy that served hundreds of students. When her time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family. Her children and grandchildren, dozens of them, filled the house that she and Thomas had built together. As she took her last breaths, she felt Thomas's presence, as real as if he were sitting beside her. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I lived, I loved, I didn't waste a single day." And she could swear she heard his voice, warm and familiar. "I know. I've been waiting for you. Welcome home, my love." Her funeral was as large as Thomas's had been. 3 generations of students attended, people whose lives she had changed through education. Her family stood together, a testament to the love story that had started so many years ago with a cowboy standing at a gate. Rose, now an old woman herself, stood at her mother's grave and told her own grandchildren the story. "They taught us what real love looks like," she said. "They taught us about forgiveness, about commitment, about choosing each other every single day. That's the legacy they left us, more valuable than this land or anything else. They showed us that home isn't a place. It's a person. It's finding that one person who makes you complete and building a life with them, no matter what challenges come." The family tradition continued. Every generation heard the story of Thomas and Amelia, of the cowboy who came back because home was where she was. It became a touchstone, a reminder of what love could be when nurtured and protected. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through Rose's line. The schoolhouse eventually became a museum, preserved as a historic site. Visitors came to learn about the pioneering couple who had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of education and love. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old house. An elderly couple, holding hands, watching the sunset together. They never stayed long, just long enough to remind everyone who saw them that true love never really dies. It echoes through generations, inspiring and guiding, a light in the darkness. Thomas and Amelia's story became legend in Oklahoma, a reminder of the Wild West's romantic side. Not all cowboy stories were about gunfights and cattle drives. Some were about love that endured, about promises kept, about two people who found their home in each other and never let go. Their graves sat side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under a cottonwood tree that Thomas had planted when they first married. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription that said it all: "Home is where you are." And so ended the story of Thomas Garrett and Amelia Foster, two souls who found each other, lost each other, and found each other again. Two people who built a love so strong it lasted beyond death, inspiring everyone who heard their tale to believe in second chances, in forgiveness, in the power of coming home. Their love had started with a young man courting a young woman in a small Oklahoma town. It had been tested by separation and hurt, but it had endured, growing stronger through every challenge, every joy, every ordinary day they spent together. They had raised a family, built a business, contributed to their community, and through it all they had loved each other with unwavering devotion. It wasn't a perfect love story. They had made mistakes, faced hardships, weathered storms. But it was real, and that made it more beautiful than any fairy tale. It was a love built on choice, on commitment, on showing up day after day and choosing each other. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, though those had their place. What mattered was the quiet evenings on the porch, the shared meals, the laughter and tears, the ordinary moments that made up a life. What mattered was that when Thomas had stood at that gate after 3 long years, Amelia had found the courage to forgive him. And Thomas had kept his promise, every single day for the rest of his life, to make her happy and to never leave again. Their story lived on, told around dinner tables and passed down through generations. It lived on in the ranch that still operated, in the school that had educated thousands, in the descendants who carried their blood and their values. But most of all, it lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard it and believed, even for a moment, that love like that was possible. Because it was possible, Thomas and Amelia had proven it. They had shown that home wasn't about walls or roofs or plots of land. Home was about finding the person who completed you and holding on to them with everything you had. Home was about forgiveness and second chances. Home was about building a life together, brick by brick, day by day, moment by moment. Home was where the heart was. And for Thomas and Amelia, from that day at the gate until their last breaths and beyond, their hearts had always been with each other. That was their legacy, their gift to the world. The proof that real, lasting, enduring love wasn't just the stuff of stories. It was real, it was possible, and it was worth fighting for. And so their story ended, not with sadness but with hope. Hope that others would find what they had found. Hope that love would continue to triumph over fear and hurt. Hope that somewhere, in whatever comes after, they were together again, sitting on a porch and watching the sunset, holding hands like they always had, finally and forever home.